So the last thing we want to do is we want to save out some of the information from one menu screen to the next as far as the menu screens go. And we're going to be using our PlayerPrefs. And the player preferences, this is just a way for us to store some information and pass it from one scene file to the next. It's a built-in functionality that Unity provides. So if you search for just player or preference, we can go in there and we'll find that this is going to store and access player preferences between game sessions. And let's just scroll down here. Some of the class functions. This is where the good stuff is. We can set an integer. We can set float values or strings or other information. And setting the integer, we're simply saying, what is it that we want to set? And then what's that value? And then when we need to get it from another file, we can get that information and pull it up. So let's take a look at the set integer function. In here, the function basically says a key, the string name that we're going to be using to call up the information, and then the value that we're setting inside of it. So for us, what do we want to do? We want to be able to do this function right before we actually pass in, or before we load up that next screen. So right in here's a good spot to do it, because if our lives are less than or equal to 0, or the game time is less than or equal to 0, this is where we're actually going to go in and say, okay, let's pass in some information. So let's go in and let's say PlayerPrefs, and we're going to do .set integer. And what are we going to put inside of here? We're going to put in a string, and we're going to call this our score. And what is that value? What is that score that we're going to be passing through? Well, it is just an integer, so let's pass in our integer. And that is right here. This is our score that we want to save so that we can show it when the player is done. So we're going to save that information right there. And let's go ahead and do the same thing. Again, just type it, don't copy paste. This allows us to save that information. Now let's go back over to our win-loss screens. And where do we need to pump that back into? We need to pump that right back into here. This is where we want to print it out. So plus, let's do our get preference. So we'll go back over to our player preference. We'll see that we've got our get integer option. This is going to use the string word that we're saving out and then print out the variable that's stored inside of it. So if we're doing our score, we're going to go back in. We'll say PlayerPrefs. And let's make that all one word. That'll flow a little better. And .get integer. And then inside of here, we want to say the key. The key for us is going to be score. And we're just going to take this guy, copy and paste him into our loss screen. There we go. So you can see in both scripts, we've got it set up so that it's going to print out that information. And then in our main script file here for the scene manager, this is where we're actually getting it, storing that score value that we've built up. And let's go give this a try. Let's go ahead and hit play. We'll build up a little bit of a score here. We've got 4 points. Let's see if we can die and test our loss screen. There we go. So we actually stored that value by setting that keyword to score, and then inside of our loss screen we use that keyword to call back up that information that we stored inside the PlayerPrefs, and we posted it, we printed it right out to the screen right there. Let's go back to our start. And this time we'll we'll try to outlast Let's check our timer real quick in our scene manager. We'll just take that one all the way down. There we go. So there we go. You win. Score 17. And one little bug that we might have noticed, if we go back in, let's see what our score starts as. Our score starts as 17. And we also only started with 1 life. So let's go ahead and exit back out. This is a good chance to go ahead and fix up that. Since we've got the player preference set in just right, it's passing over the information the way we want it to pass it over. Let's go back to our scene manager, because this is where it's actually happening to us. We've got our score as a static variable. We've got the lives as a static variable. And when we actually are dying, if it's equal to 0, it sets it to 3. But now if we actually win, then we also have to set our variables back to the original scores that we want them to be. Otherwise, it does what it's doing on us right now. So let's go ahead and go back in. We'll do our lives equal 3. And then the other thing we want to do on our score, right in here, we want to go ahead and reset our score. So after we've printed our score, let's go back in and say score equals 0. There we go. Let's give that a shot, see what we get. So we've got 1 point, prints out the right point, we go back in, we start the game, we've got 0 and 3. So our scores gets reset just right. And let's make sure our win screen works the way it's supposed to. We'll go back in. Let's take this guy down again. So we're at 3 with 2 lives. You win. The score is right. We go back in. 0 and 3. So everything starts off just the way it's supposed to. Okay, at this point, we're saving over our information. All of our controls work. All of our information is being passed correctly, and the values are being reset where they're supposed to be reset. So we're looking in real good shape. At this point, we can actually have a little fun with it, and we can add just some additional functionality. We can look at adding that shield to it. We could look at maybe adding 2 firing points, or whatever it is that we want to do. We'll start off with a shield, and then we'll build from there.